Hello and welcome to the Christian Fantasy and Sci-Fi Podcast, where we talk about anything and everything fantasy and science fiction. Your host is Matt Crosswhite, and the subject matter expert is Josiah Marshall. And here we go.
Hello and welcome back. Last week I had the privilege of introducing my youngest brother and very creative, talented musician, Andrew Marshall. And today we're going to resume the latter half of our conversation. So here we go. I'm actually trying to recall. I think it was CBS Sunday Morning where they had an artist on from the 60s and 70s. And I can't remember who exactly it was, but he said something to the effect of, I don't know. I can't write like that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where that magic came from.
Right.
And that even reminds me of the guy that wrote Drove My Chevy to the Levee, where the
Don McLean.
Don McLean, where even
American
he said,
Pie.
yeah, where even he said, even writing there. I watched a documentary on him,
Mm-hmm.
and how he even said when it came to that song, he wasn't looking to create something. He was trying to process. He was processing what was going on at the time.
Sure.
And I think that the events that surround you end up being that kind of catalyst, magical, whatever you want to call it, but the catalyst to be able to produce what you produce.
Right.
And so for example, that song you were talking about earlier that you produced so quickly, you're already in a frame of mind. You're already within a context of that album and in a place of life where these were just thoughts that just came out unbiddenly, which is why when you were talking about earlier about not getting past yourself and just letting yourself go.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a source that I use a lot, and that's Finding Forrester with Sean Connery.
Okay.
Did you ever see that movie?
I have not. No.
Okay. Well, in it, this real quickly, this young man, he lives in the hood where he actually also lives. And his friends tell him, hey, you know what? That's the weird guy. Why don't you break in and prove to us who you really are? And then you'll prove who you are to us. Yeah. So he does. But in the process, he forgets his backpack.
Okay.
Because he realizes that when he breaks in, wow, this guy's got paper all over the place. And at night, what you learn about the younger man is that he is writing, and he is writing. And so when he goes back to pick up his backpack, not only just get his notebooks, but also his homework, the guy finally gives it to him. Sean Connery's character finally gives it to him. And when he opens it up, he finds that Sean Connery's read all of his notes and has even written notes in. Well, where are you going with this?
Yeah.
This is a good thought, but this is a bad thought, sort of thing.
Yeah. Right.
And then later on, they eventually develop this mentor-mentee relationship. And he's trying to explain to this young man, Sean is, what it means to write. And so he sits down because the kid is just sitting there. I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. Sean goes over on the other side of the desk, grabs a piece of paper, puts it in a typewriter, and just starts writing. And as he's writing, he's talking. This is not about you thinking right now. Don't think. You can do that later. You can also edit later. This is you getting it out and just letting out whatever it is on your mind. And in the course of doing this short little 15-minute or 5-minute lecture, he pulls out a completely filled piece of paper.
I'm listening. You're good.
Okay. So, sorry, I didn't know if you needed to.
No, I'm just switching the room so that the little guy can go to bed.
Okay, gotcha. Gotcha.
You're good.
I can edit that out later if you like.
Yeah, I kind of figured. Whatever flows. People can hear about the realities of having a child if they would like.
Perfect. Then I'm going to leave it in then. I'm going to leave it in. I like being.
I'm an artist who lives in this little fairy house who no one ever interrupts me, and I'm just surrounded by my beautiful thoughts and creating constantly.
You know what? I love that. I like the idea of, instead of always putting up such beautiful things that your life is so perfect, and not putting up the picture of the sink filled with dishes. Yeah. What are we promoting here?
Yeah.
So there is a question I wanted to ask because of this, and this I think will be probably our last section. Okay. But so you've got this creativity.
Mm-hmm.
How has that creativity drawn you to things such as Star Trek, Star Wars, Doctor Who, and other things of your that are in that realm and genre of things?
Sure. I mean, it's so imaginative, right? And like it's got to be, even if I think about how it relates to making music or creating art, it takes you on this, it's explorative, right? In
Yeah.
my mind, and I don't know if it's just something biological that people would just like find different ways to relate to this, but like it's explorative and my mind just wants to explore. My
Mm-hmm.
mind wants to be put into scenarios that like are abnormal
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
seem abnormal, right? Like,
Right.
oh, it's just so
Right.
exciting to be like to be in space, right? Like
Yeah.
obviously, like Star Wars has been a huge one. Like to think about being in the Millennium Falcon, right? And then each thing that comes out, like how to think about being with that creature, with that person, or on that different planet. It's like
Mm-hmm.
that's so interesting, and
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if I don't know, is this just something in a personality that's drawn to stuff like that?
Mm-hmm.
Because then my wife just makes fun of me for being a nerd, you know. It's like, but in the reality of it all, it's like because when like, when we like, well, you married that nerd, so who's the real nerd? But
Right.
but because the reality of it is like the content that she likes to watch, or she likes to consume.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
When you really get deep into like the Star Treks and the Star Wars, like sci-fi and fantasy, it's like you could take all of the fantastical elements out of it, and it's still
Mm-hmm.
just a human story, right? It's like ultimately
Right.
that's what makes you connect. That's what makes
Right.
that's what turns. There's this whole cult of Trekkies, right? Like it is just
Yes.
massive. The people who like Star Trek,
Oh
and
yes.
they are
Oh yes.
committed for life,
Oh,
and
oh yes.
they are
You've been to
hardcore.
the Star Trek
Oh,
conventions.
I've
You've
been to
seen this firsthand.
two
I was
Star Trek
about to walk into
conventions, and then
one
we
and
went to
I turned
Comic
around
Cons.
and walked out.
It's but like but the beauty of it, and what I think would like draws me even to going to a convention every once in a while,
Uh,
is it's the human aspect of it. It's like the what
sure.
those people are getting so devoted to.
Yeah.
They're getting devoted to people. They're not getting
Yeah.
devoted to Klingons. They're not getting devoted to Wookiees. Like no, it's the character, the human, like the relational aspect with those characters is
Mm-hmm.
what's happening there and what's creating
Mm-hmm.
that deep connection. And so
Yes.
when I look at these people who are so hardcore, right?
Yeah.
Like yeah, it's like I'm hardcore, but it's just masked by my beauty, right? Like where so many people are like, you're way too beautiful to be like no handsome people, like it's, which just isn't true these days, but
Yeah.
but I did, you know, like I'm not looking at my face. I'll stop talking about my beauty. But like
No,
anyway, but
that's
like there's
fine. You're fine.
but it is just there's like these stereotypes of the way certain people look, and it's like I'm drawn into just how explorative it is. It's exciting. It's different. And for me, I've my whole life is related to sci-fi and fantasy, mostly through the visual arts, right? Like I'm watching
Mm-hmm.
movies, I'm watching TV shows, I'll listen to some radio dramas, or I'll listen to something like that. Um, I think hopefully some of your listeners could be able to relate to this aspect where I've never really had a great relationship with reading. Like
Mm-hmm.
I would fall asleep. It
Mm-hmm.
tires me out. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
I really worked out that muscle well when I
Mm-hmm.
was a kid. And
Mm-hmm.
so now that I'm seeing this, like, but I see value in reading.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
so like, okay, I want that. So
Yeah.
just to see it as a muscle that needs to be worked out, to borrow
Right.
from what we said earlier, like, okay, then I just need to practice. And I could probably, up until a couple months ago, I could probably count on one hand how many fiction books I've read in my life,
Oh
right?
wow.
To where like even with the Star Wars stuff, most of my consumption of Star Wars with through films, or like there's over 100 Star Wars books written, which I have delved into quite a few of those, but also it's like there's other ways to do research, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'd read magazines, or I'd do a deep dive on one specific character and read about those. And so it's less about finding the book and more about like diving into these little niche categories, which after a while you start building the whole tapestry,
Mm-hmm.
and you start understanding the world and the history of these characters, the history of these planets and stuff and these cultures. Like so it's built slowly over the years, but it's because like whenever I'd sit down to read a book, my mind the muscles in my mind weren't trained to do that very well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's why music was so attractive to me. That's why lyrical writing was so attractive to me. It's like it just connected more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but so now that I see the value in reading and I want it.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, like, and I guess the reason I'd want to say this is like, it's too late to get into the reading aspect of it,
Right.
right? Like, I love
Right.
sci-fi movies all the way back. One of the most beautiful movies, actually, a book I'm reading right now for the first time is Jules Verne, A Trip to the Moon. Right.
Uh-huh.
Which
Mm-hmm.
back in 1902.
Oh, the old
George
silent movie?
George Méliès.
Yes.
I think that's how you say his
Yes.
last name.
Yes.
Released a movie, I think it's called To the Moon
Mm-hmm.
and Back,
Mm-hmm.
which was inspired by Jules Verne, A Trip to the Moon.
Right. Yep.
I love silent films. I love sci-fi, and so I've loved To the Moon and Back for a lot of years.
Mm.
And it's just gorgeous, and but I'd never read the book,
Mm.
and so that's what I'm doing right now. I'm reading
Okay.
I'm reading my very first Jules Verne book. And
Nice.
yeah, and it's very exciting. And so like I'm really hoping that, like, even if for some people it's like I also read another book. I'm in a book club with some guys right now that one of the books we just finished, like, that might have been above my skill level. I don't know what was going on half the time. I was reading pages 2 or 3 times to try and keep up.
Yeah.
But like, to see it not as a deficiency, but just as a muscle atrophy. Like, okay,
Sure.
it's not it's not, I'm not dumb because I can't read that book. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, just my muscles not worked out. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
So I just got to
Mm-hmm.
work out, and I will gain that, and it'll be good. And then I'll be able to, like, because I've listened to Star Wars books on tape and stuff, and that's a little bit easier for me to do the books. But now I'm hoping once I get this muscle worked out,
Yeah.
like, oh, I'll be able to have this even deeper relationship with the literature side of. Gosh,
Sure.
I remember when I was a kid, it took me
Sure.
like 9 months to read The Hobbit. Right? Like,
Oh, wow.
it was just so tiring because
Uh-huh.
like Tolkien is such a phenomenal writer, but he's so detailed. And I'm like, well, it was probably just out of my skill level,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine. It's
Right.
fine, but I worked hard. I finished it.
Yeah.
But it was
Yep.
just so tiring.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, that's fine. I'll just work up to it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
now I have people recommending me sci-fi and fantasy, which might be a good list I'd love to get from you, of like sci-fi and fantasy like at different skill levels, right? Like, if you're new to reading fantasy, I'm not new to watching fantasy or
Right.
to the world of fantasy, but if you're new to
Right.
reading fantasy, this is a
Uh-huh.
good reading level that
Yeah.
like helps you. It doesn't assume too much, right? Like the books that assume you know what's going on, you know all the different type of creatures, you know all the different type of spells or whatever's going on.
Right.
It's like well, it doesn't assume too much. Like, yeah, here's
Yes.
mid-level, and you keep going up until you get into the hardcore stuff that's like really heady, even beyond Tolkien. It's like, what is
Right.
going on?
Right.
But yeah, and so people are excited to recommend that stuff because that
Sure.
stuff's wonderful, right? Like Harry Potter is hugely acclaimed, and
Yes.
because it's accessible, and adults
It
love it.
is.
Adults love
Very
it,
much so.
teenagers
Yes.
love it, kids love it because everybody can access it. Like,
Mhm.
okay, that's wonderful. I just need to start at the books that I can access, and then
Right.
I'll start getting better at it, and I'll start reading more, and it'll become more fun. And so that's
Exactly.
so,
Exactly.
yeah. And so people connect to that. Just keep reading.
Exactly.
It'll
And that's
get
been
there.
my entire push. When I owned that bookstore for
Yeah.
7 years.
Yeah.
One of the things that I did was I connected a lot with parents.
Okay.
And I would just sit down and just listen. And they would say, well, I want my child to get into reading,
Mhm.
but they either don't like it
Mhm.
or they're more visually motivated than they are vocabulary, literature wise. So how can I do this without actually putting a TV show in front of them? Because I even had some parents that didn't have television sets for very, very, very specific reasons. But which is why I got into the specialties and really the knowledge of radio dramas,
Mhm.
graphic novels, and just the various different types of medias available that are used to share and get out there various stories, right? And as you're saying, yes, the different levels of stories. And so sometimes it would be, well, there's this story that's in a graphic novel that you've been suggested. However, that story, even in graphic novel form, can be a bit more heady than, say, this one over here. This would probably be more in line with your not only age, but even perhaps any sort of disabilities or anything that might cause the child not to be able to engage very well. And so I'm completely behind that. And the effect I saw was twofold. One, the parents going, oh, great. I don't have to stress about this. I don't have to worry about this. And then on top of that, the joy of these kids going, this is so cool. I remember getting somebody into the Star Wars radio drama that was done by NPR. And they just, they came alive. And even the parent came back to me later and said, wow, I've never seen my child so excited about something. That's what story can end up doing. Story not only can enliven somebody, but I've once even likened it to the fact that story gives a power of meaning. And as a result, it can enable somebody to realize I have a voice, I have interests, I have a perspective, and I'm allowed to engage with something. And as a result, be able to say, this is what I find in it, whether it's part of myself or if it's something that's caused me to change and go, oh, wait a minute, you know what? I never really saw it from that way before. Story is challenging in that way because it whether you like it or not, it's kind of like life in the sense that it just grabs your attention and goes, I've got you now. Now it's something for you to have to wrestle with. And it doesn't have to be something so complex as, say, Brandon Sanderson's Way of Kings. It can even be something that's just as simple as, well, as I was brought up earlier, Little Boy Blue by Eugene Fields. A lot of words does not constitute a greater message. Sometimes the greatest message is usually in the simplest words. I'm even thinking of Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. What was that? 275 words?
Is that all?
And is that all? And then there's all these other politicians that will write hours and hours and long pages worth of speeches. But here's Abraham, and he's changing an entire focus of a country in just 275 words. And so
that kind of editing, I love. My favorite quote from Mark Twain is I apologize for the length of this letter. I didn't have time to make it shorter. And I think that's wonderful because I could have said all of this better with less words if I had the time. Because that's the power of a story. That's the power of writing. More words does not constitute better.
No, it does not.
Go
ahead.
I was even in this book club that I'm in, the only rule is it has to be fiction. But the subcategory of rules is let's keep it under 400 pages. If it's above that, fine. We'll read it. But this is just for fun. Let's keep it under, or it was under 500 pages, whatever it was. Let's keep it under 500. If it's above that, we'll call you a jerk and read it, but this is just for fun. We want to be able to read it and just, it's not some epic, but
which is why before we got recording, we were talking about Star Trek and about some of the different projects that they've had through time. But I've always enjoyed the medium of using visual, just TV in general. Even though, regardless whether or not I grew up with it or not, that mom and dad didn't buy a TV until I was 5 or 6 years old.
Well, but then that applies to me being born. So
true. You weren't born yet.
Natalie makes fun of me for growing up in the 1950s. You grew up in like the 1930s, dude. Like I don't.
I did, and I will admit I still enjoy my big band music.
Oh sure, yeah.
But and the good old black and whites. But let's take Star Trek Deep Space Nine for example. There were some of the episodes. It's either when you're working with a specific medium, you use it, right? So they could have either used just a great deal of words, but rather they allowed the visual to help convey more of the story. Right. The same way producers and writers in radio dramas use their medium to help tell more of the story. It's sound. What are you hearing? Right. I even had who I've considered my writing mentor for years, John Fornoff. He actually, I got to interview him one time, and he was talking about this new immersive audio Bible that he's putting out. But he said this is the interesting thing about using audio, because he had a buddy look at him and says, well, what if the part where Mary comes to her cousin, it starts in the womb? Because remember, John the Baptist was reacting before he was even born to the presence of his cousin. And so what would it be like to actually put the audio into the womb and hearing that reaction from John before he's even born? That's an interesting concept. That's an interesting way of looking at it. But that's using the facilitation of that particular medium. And so depending on whatever medium you use, whether it's book, whether it's graphic novels, whether it's audio books, radio dramas, and even then when you use the audio portion, you can go full cast, you can go some audio effects, maybe no audio effects, but then you've got the visual of movie and TV. The entire concept that is, say, fantasy, science fiction, or fiction in general, which I've understood already that a lot of companies are dropping because they find it a little too difficult, especially when you've got so many diehard fans going, that's not right. It's not in the book. It's not in this Chronicles.
Right.
And so,
which I have thoughts on that, but anyways,
I'm sure you do. But the point I'm trying to get to is that you have found, you have an understanding of how music can facilitate the words that you're writing, right? You understand your craft, you understand your medium as to how to really produce something that's going to be able to reflect what you're feeling, right? And thinking. And so, I guess my last question on this would be, why music? Why not poetry and just simply publishing it as a poem? Or what was it about music that really made you want to go, this is how I want to convey my creativity?
I don't know that it was so conscious.
It's just natural.
Yeah, it was something kind of primal, right? Like I didn't sit there with like, well, there's painting, there's poetry, there's filmmaking, there's music. Like I didn't sit down and make a choice really.
Perfect.
It was just, that was it.
Perfect. Right? Yep. And that's the point I want to make to some of my listeners, is that being creative doesn't have to be so cognitive.
Right.
It can be natural, just as natural as breathing.
Oh yeah.
If you're already have a predication towards a specific art form, whether it's painting, drawing, whatever, just allow yourself to do it. It's almost giving yourself the permission. Not only am I giving you permission to get out of the way, but I'm also going to give you permission to just do it. Because I know that for creatives, you were saying earlier about the question of money and everything. And it was reminded to me of how some parents, you've heard the old phrase of, well, you better have a backup.
Right.
So the perspective of the world on creatives has been, it's been strong, and it's definitely been out there for many, many, many years, thousands of years, about what people think of creatives and people that are creative. And so what confidence have you been able to find in just been continuing to just do what you want, despite what the economy might do or what somebody might say?
Not having a backup plan.
Sure.
Like,
Sure,
I
but I
don't know.
mean,
Some days I feel kind of stuck because I didn't go get a different degree, or I didn't go. It's like I got no other options. but which isn't true, right? Like, because
no,
there are so
you've been
many
a music
options, right?
teacher. You've been a music teacher. You've taught
But even
guitar.
like with backup plans and stuff, it's like you don't need to. Like, there are plenty of jobs out there. The wonderful trade jobs. There's plenty of service industry jobs that you can build a real career out of and just have
Mm-hmm.
a fine, wonderful career. So when it comes to backup plans, it's not the fact that I didn't get some marketing degree before I went and studied music. It was but well, that's
But the confidence,
the
the ability
confidence,
to keep going when you're even met with
right?
difficulty, right?
Right. And I'll harken back to what I was saying earlier of the last year and a half being really uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Is so much of my confidence before came out of some ignorance, right? Of like, I can just do it. But like, that was ignorance of how the industry works in a lot of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And it was ignorant to, and some of it not even ignorant, like time hadn't exposed what was going to happen yet. Like when I was a kid, social media was not the way that music was made.
Right.
Now it is the way that music is made. And I'm sure it's the way, like for a lot of, I'm sure in literature also, that's how you get your word out there in so many different ways.
Yeah.
I do not like social media. and so that's a real problem.
Ditto.
That's the real problem when an entire industry switches to be dependent on this thing. Like, okay, like, and stop complaining or get off the field. It's like, if okay, you don't like social media, that's fine. But that's how the game is played. So either change your expectations on what you want your art to do in the world, or change your approach to the business.
Yeah.
But what's kept me with like the last year, like I thankfully I've had some older artists around me who just aren't worried about me, and I'm over here like questioning my existence and like my purpose and everything, and I'm like, yeah, you're fine. What do you mean I'm fine? I'm like, yeah, all artists question why they do things, and so right now I'm in a season of questioning why I do things. And it's not that I haven't had those before. This question just feels a little more deeply rooted. But every time I've answered that question before, it's because there's just something inside. Humans are designed to be creative. We create. Right. And whether that's music or whether that's a new recipe in the kitchen or whether that's tiling a bathroom, it's people being creative. Is a part of who we are. And for me, I've found that not only the music, but the culture of the music, the other musicians I live life with, the other writers I live life with, the producers, the people on the it's so much of my home that it's like, okay, whether that has nothing to do with a day job, right?
Yeah.
Like that has nothing to do with my income.
Right.
That has to do, it's like, okay, there's other ways to make money, whether in music or not in music, but even inside music, there's plenty of ways to make money. That might not be what I thought I would be doing with like, oh, I'm just performing 24/7. I'm just traveling 24/7. It's like, well, no, I've done a lot of weird studio work, right? Where like I have to come, like they just hire me to come in and the day before, like, hey, also, can you sing in an Irish accent? Like, well,
oh, have you heard his Merrimack?
And so, but like, I never thought that wasn't my plan.
Yeah.
To get hired to sing in a different accent or to get hired to like to sing like Freddie Mercury. We need to do a cover of these Queen songs and stuff.
Yes.
But I can do that, and it was fun. Like, well, I didn't set out to do that, but great.
Hey, thank you so much for
and now
tuning
it
in
affords
today.
me to
Andrew
just
and I have more of a
embrace on a
conversation to
day-to-day,
come.
moment by moment.
We're going to make this a
creativity
two-parter,
is
so
wonderful.
stay tuned for next
and
week
it's not
as we
just,
talk more
it's not
about
just
the magic of
validated
creativity.
when
We'll
other
see you
people
then.
experience what I created. It's validated just because I'm valid as a person.
Exactly.
I'm valid as a human being. So the things I create, now I create, it's valid. Doesn't mean other
Yep.
people are going to enjoy it. Mean other people are going to know it exists.
Exactly. Which actually would go back to my point of saying story gives a power to meaning.
Yeah.
It really, really does. And story isn't just so encapsulated into specifically a written word. It is creativity at its finest, at its core, at its heart. Because that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with people. And when you're dealing with people and you're dealing with how they're created, and more so the inherentness of who they are and what they've been given to do.
Yeah.
When they're allowed to, when they're enabled, not allowed, when they're enabled to express this, the vitality that would give, not only to the creativity, but more so to the person themselves, I think would go a great deal in just allowing. I'm not going to use allowing again. It would go a great deal into enabling relationships where relationships have faltered in a lot of ways, because we're looking at not understanding. I don't get it. You're left-brained. I don't get it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm right-brained. I still don't get it. We were talking about Star Trek Deep Space Nine earlier and how one of the things that they really nailed was tolerance. But it's not just simply tolerance for the sake of tolerance. It's listening. It's back and forth. It's giving the other person some sort of credibility, but not even just that. It's dignity. It's value in saying what you have to say, what you have to produce is of value, whether or not I find it of value or not, or whether or not I connect to it or not.
Yep. They do not need you to understand.
No.
They need you to know, to believe that they are having a real human experience.
Exactly.
And that's valid.
Exactly.
You don't have to understand every perspective, but just trust that you are a human having experience, and I can trust that and validate that.
Exactly. Well, I think that's the perfect conclusion to this episode. I really want to thank my brother for coming on. He's truly a phenomenal musician, and it's been an honor for me to be able to be involved with the projects that he's done. I remember that first concert with Westward, standing back there with that. Oh man, it was just so exciting to being able to hand people, this is his CD. This is his CD.
Yep, that first CD release show, you're back there hawking the CD.
Yep, I was. So for our listeners who want to get to know Andrew Marshall more and more of his music, Andrew, where can they find your stuff?
So the website has links to everything, andrewcmarshall.com. The C is middle initial, andrewcmarshall.com, but also Andrew C. Marshall on all the social medias, all the streaming platforms. My last album, you can search it under Andrew C. Marshall. Old band is called, a previous band, we're in hiatus. We've been writing, don't tell anybody, but called Westward.
Right.
I have a YouTube series that's a very slow burner, but that's good. That's okay because it's my creativity and there's no timeline on it. It's fine.
Please plug the show. Please plug it. I think it's a great
it's
series.
It's called Heard from a Hearse. I drive a Cadillac Hearse from 1996, and the premise of the show is I've got bands and artists in the back of it, and we talk about death for a little bit, and then they play a couple songs, and it's and it's been
what do you call those tiny death concerts?
Tiny death concerts, yeah. Tiny death concerts, and we're about to release. I don't know when. We're going to release our first Tiny Death Conversations because I want to expand it beyond just performers, but just creatives in general who have an interesting perspective on death. And so there'll be an episode of Tiny Death Conversations coming soon as well.
Okay.
But
on andrewcmarshall.com.
Yep. andrewcmarshall.com.
You can find all of your entire catalog of music.
Yeah, there's links to everything there, or Spotify, Apple Music, all that, wherever you listen to music, it's on there. Yeah.
Well, very good. Well, again, as from Christian Fantasy and Sci-Fi Podcast, we want to thank you again for providing your music. It has really been phenomenal being able to listen to a completed episode and hear the music and just how it really works so well. I remember sending you the little recording I have of my host introducing, not my host, but the host of the episode, Matt, and you came back with what you came back with was just so fantastic. Yeah. And so I just can't thank you enough for your creativity, the exercise that you've put into that in developing that muscle and being able to use it well. It shows.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate that, man. It means a lot. I appreciate you guys' support.
You're welcome.
Wish the podcast the best of luck. And if people are out there listening and being creative, just life ebbs and flows. And it really is just okay. If you're wondering about your creativity or something's not going right, doesn't seem like it ebbs and flows. That's all right. Yep. I'm in an ebb right now and it doesn't feel good. That's fine. It's okay. It's okay. Because it's going to flow soon. It's okay.
It will flow soon. Yep. Yeah. Every little thing's going to be all right.
That's right.
Well, again,
one last plug on my last album that I came out with. There is a song called Kobayashi Maru.
Yes.
So for all the Star Trek fans out there, based on the infamous test that Captain Kirk cheated on, the Kobayashi Maru. It's pretty fun.
Yes, that's a good. Yeah. That's an important.
And there's a cool video that I made of it. I'll send you a link so you can put it out on whatever you do and send it to people and stuff. Sure. But YouTube video, I made a video for it, so you can find that on my YouTube channel. But I collaborated with our other brother, Jonathan Marshall at Marshall Models, because he builds custom models, and
he does. We're actually looking forward to having him come on too and talk about that.
That'll be
it's really phenomenal.
And so I used the models that he built as the footage for this video, and I think it's cool. It's pretty fun.
I think it's cool too. Yeah. Oh man! Well, again, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us. It's been a blast, and we thank you for listening. If you ever have any thoughts, ideas, show ideas, or just even want to comment on what we've talked about today, please feel free to write into us at cfsfpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you. And until then, please keep enjoying what you do and be the geek that you can be.